positively, because I think that that's really important, that we don't just talk about what not to say, but we talk about what to say. And when somebody works on Shmiras HaLashon, when somebody works very hard on not speaking Lashon Hara, so what happens? Their relationships get better. They become a person that can be trusted. They, again, we'll go back to what I said before about judging people favorably and not being critical of other people. If you're looking at somebody with an ayin tov and you're training yourself to not be critical of others, you're obviously going to have a much better experience going through this world. You're looking at people and seeing the positive. And again, like I said before, it is something that you sometimes need to train yourself if it's not natural, if you have a habit of like being critical and looking at people negatively. And I actually just want to say another word about this, because we know this, Chofetz Chaim says in the beginning of Sefer Chofetz Chaim, he lists all the positive and negative commandments that we potentially violate when we speak Lashon Hara. So there's a list. I think there's 17 negative commandments, 14 positive commandments, and 4 curses. I might have gotten that number slightly wrong, but we don't get all of them all the time. So let's say, for example, honor your mother and father. So if you say Lashon Hara about your parents, you also violate that positive commandment. So some of them apply sometimes, but the one that almost always applies is that we have an obligation to be dan l'kafschos, is to judge people favorably, right? Because always the way you look at somebody and the impression that you have is going to impact the words that you say about them. Now we know that Hashem judges people the way we judge others. So if we give people the benefit of the doubt, Hashem gives other people, us, the benefit of the doubt. The thing is that if you think about that, that calculation doesn't make sense, right? Hashem judges us the way we judge others. The thing is that if I go into the store and I see a friend and that friend is rude to me, so I immediately have a negative impression, and then I can talk to myself. I'm like, you know what? I just heard this shir. I'm going to be down the kafschos. Maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they just got bad news, or, you know, are overtired. They didn't get a good night's sleep. And I think of all the different reasons. Okay, now I'm going to judge them favorably, and I'm not critical. And now when I get home, I don't say Lashon Hara about that person to my husband, right? Because in my mind, I've kind of worked it out, right? The thing is, the difference is that Hashem really knows what actually happened. Hashem knows the truth. When how does it work? Hashem judges us the way we judge other people, but I'm a person, I'm a human. I don't know what happened to that person before they walked into the store. Hashem actually knows. So the answer to that question is that the truth is that anything that you see, it's not that it's the truth or it's not the truth. It's how you look at that and how you judge that experience that is going to determine what comes out from that. So let's say, for example, somebody was rude to me, right? And let's say they had a really bad night's sleep, or their kid was up crying. But the truth is, at the end of the day, they really were still rude. But do I say like, okay, you know what? It doesn't really matter that you're sleep deprived. You still can't talk to me. You still can't talk to me that way. It's still not okay. Or do I look at that person with compassion and say, oh my gosh, it's so hard to have a baby who doesn't sleep at night. Your reflexes are totally not on the next day. So both situations are totally true. Do we look at people, like we always say on Rosh Hashanah Kippur, we want Hashem to look at us with rachamim. Hashem has rachamim, has mercy, and has justice. And they're both true. But we want to look at people, and the lens that we apply to other people is the lens that Hashem uses when talking about our own judgment. And again, if you don't have this naturally, if this isn't something you grew up with, sometimes people who grew up with critical parents, so that's what they learn. They learn to be critical, and that's fine. But we have agency as adults, and we could slowly work to change the way we see other people with a lot of hard work and a lot of effort. And again, you work on this, so now your life is better in this world. Your life is better right now. You have better relationships. People trust you. If people know that you don't speak Lashon Hara, you actually wind up, I would say, you always wind up like knowing more gossip, because people tell you stuff, you know, and they confide in you, and, you know, you wind up knowing more things because people know that you're not going to talk. And there is, by the way, one of the most common questions that I get, 2 questions I get all the time about Shmiras HaLashon. One is about Lashon Hara and WhatsApp chats. That's the number 1 question, I think. And I'm a big fan of technology, by the way, but obviously it's a challenge. But the second thing is about venting. Like, I really need to talk to somebody. And this isn't the place for it, but there's lots of halachas around that. And you're certainly, if you need to talk to somebody, and that person's going to help you deal with something, you're allowed to talk to them about whatever's going on with you, even if it involves speaking negatively about somebody else. But I want to spend the last few minutes really, like I said in the beginning, even more positive with regards to speech. Speech is the way that we are like Hashem. When Hashem created Adam and he blew the Nefesh Chaya, the pasuk says Nefesh Chaya, into his nostrils. Onkelos translates the words Nefesh Chaya, which is living spirit, and translates those words as Ruach Malala, which is a speaking spirit. So the breath of Hashem that is blown into our nostrils, that makes us human, that etzem, that Tselem Elokim, that is our ability to speak. Speech is how we are like Hashem. Rashi says the difference between people and animals is that animals speak, people speak and people have logic and reasoning. Animals can communicate, but they can't speak, and they have feelings, but they don't have logic, right? So an animal doesn't look at their meal and say, you know what, I want to lose a few pounds. Maybe I'll wait and have a salad later, right? If an animal is hungry, if they're feeling good, if they like the food, they'll eat the food. And if they don't, they won't. But we have logic and we have the ability to communicate, and speech and logic are very, very much intertwined. In fact, studies show that the more we develop our vocabulary, the more we develop our reasoning ability. So it isn't that we think that like, well, if I'm very smart, then I can express the words that I say in a very smart way and I'll have a higher vocabulary. It goes both ways. That's true, but it's also true the other way. That if I learn new words, I have access to new ideas. Speech is how we are like Hashem. And a lot of times what happens is that when people, again, start to learn Shmiras HaLashon, they get very nervous and they say, oh my gosh, I can't say anything. I can't talk. So I want to give you a mashal. I want to give you an example of what this is like. Imagine a guy goes to a doctor and the doctor says, you know what? You are very heavy. You have diabetes. You are on track to have some sort of major medical situation. You need to change your lifestyle immediately. I want you to cut out gluten. I want you to cut out sugar. I want you to cut out dairy. And, you really, if you don't do this right now, then it's not going to be a good situation. So the man's very depressed, but he wants to live. And so he decides he's going to take the doctor's advice and he goes home. 2 days, 3 days later, the doctor gets a call from this man's wife. And she says, doctor, you gave my husband terrible advice. He's lying in bed. He could barely get out of bed. He's so weak. The doctor says, what do you mean? He's been doing all these, engaging in all these bad behaviors. And he should be starting to feel better. And she said, well, he hasn't eaten a thing since he left your office. All the things that he eats, you told him he's not allowed to eat. He can't eat potato chips anymore, and he can't eat French fries, and he can't eat, candy, and he can't eat all these things, and he can't drink soda, and he has nothing to eat now. And the doctor, obviously this is a fake situation, but the doctor says, I didn't tell him that he shouldn't eat. I told him that he should stop eating the things that are bad for him. The point is that now he should be eating fruits and vegetables, and he should be eating healthy grains and lean proteins, and he should be experimenting with spices, and he should be, finding all sorts of wonderful things to eat that are actually going to make him feel so much better. And I think a lot of times our approach with Lashon Hara, when we learn about Shmiras HaLashon and we learn about the laws, is that we take this approach of this man. I can't say all the things that I said, therefore I can't say anything. And that's a very depressing way to go through life, because speech is the ultimate gift from Hashem. It is how we are like Hashem. So we want to think not just what not to say, but what about what should we say? And I actually have I developed a whole curriculum about this at one point. So I'm not going to get into the whole thing. It's a totally different speech, but there's so many opportunities that we have every single day to speak in a way that is uplifting. So just one example, giving somebody a compliment. Right? Now, giving somebody a real compliment is not so simple. You really need to, again, develop that ayin tov and look at a person and see them and think about what they're doing. I have a yeshiva. My husband has a yeshiva. We had boys living in our house for many years, and they sometimes get invited out to people's houses for meals. And I told the boys once, they were invited out for a meal to somebody for Shabbos. And I heard this trick from Rabbi Vitters when he was a young man. He was at our house. And so I passed this on to them. I said, when you get up from the meal, don't just say, thank you, everything was delicious. Say, thank you, everything was delicious, but I especially like the chicken. Pick one thing that you really like and compliment that thing. And that will make the hostess feel like not just that you're saying, it's not just it's not really a compliment to say everything was delicious. It's really just good manners. And there's a big difference between good manners and good midos. I mean, they're both important, but we shouldn't mistake good manners for midos. They're not a good character trait. So pick the one thing and say, just thank you. Especially love the chicken. And then actually it became a joke because I would serve the boys lasagna or something. And it'd be like, we especially love the chicken, Mrs. Davidowitz. And that, that became the thing afterwards. But, if you think about, I'd really like to give somebody a genuine compliment. What does that mean? That means you need to pay attention to that person and you need to notice whatever is going on. You go to somebody's simcha and you want to say, oh, it was a beautiful wedding. Thank you so much for having us. But what if you say something like, it was so beautiful the way you danced with everybody there and really included everybody in your simcha, and you're really paying attention to what they did. So it's a way to use speech, again, to uplift, to connect, to create that connection, to create that Ahavas Chinam, to create that connection between Jews, which is so, so powerful. Another example, validating somebody else's experience. Saying thank you, again, in a very genuine way where you really take your time out to appreciate what somebody did for you. Listening to somebody. Listening is a really big part of speech. Sometimes not talking is the best part of speech, actually. In the laws of Lashon Hara, there's a whole section about listening to Lashon Hara. Right? You're not allowed to listen to it in the same way that you're not allowed to speak it. And very often the person who's listening to the Lashon Hara is even more responsible than the person who's speaking it, because nobody would say Lashon Hara if there wasn't somebody who's willing to hear it. And in the same way that listening can sometimes be such a force for bad, it could also be such a force for good, because what does everybody want but somebody to just listen to them and hear them? And if you could be that person who's available to listen and hear somebody else, then it's one of the most powerful gifts that we could give anybody. All right, I've been talking for a long time. I just want to, again, say thank you to Aviva and to Barry for having me here. Thank you to all of you who are listening. I do want to open it up to questions, but to give all of us a bracha, really, that we should pick, again, a small thing from this. Rabbeinu Yonah says, if you're ever inspired, you pick a small thing, and that will take the inspiration from what you heard and make it practical, and not only make it practical, but make it last. So you pick a person, or you pick a very, very small but practical irritant, and work on looking at that in a positive way. Or a person maybe that you tend to speak more Lashon Hara, and try to just work on that. And in that chus, hopefully next year, or maybe this year even, hopefully maybe this year, Tisha B'Av will be yantiv for all.
Okay, I just want to say thank you, Yocheved. Thank you and thank you and thank you. And I Emet Hashem, this will be the first of many, many for the Global Chizuk mission. And thank you for your words. Thank you for your emes, and thank you for your realness and your authenticity. And I just want to stop and say again, I want to thank all the sponsors that sponsored today. And I want to add, please, Refuah Shalema for Hannah Mindel, Basar Zelda, and for Ruvain Ben Ita, that they should have Refuah Shalema and Simcha and light and for everybody. And thank you, everybody for being a part of this. And everybody should have a great day and a very, very meaningful, purposeful. We should take, Yocheved, all of your words and be able to put it into our being. And we should walk into Tisha B'Av as a moed and as a simcha and as a chag. And we should be on the other side in Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.